Hello dear student, I am Dr. Vinod Kumar Advani from the Department of Commerce, the Bhopal School of Social Science. Dear student, today we are starting a very important topic of personal finance, that is tax planning with tax avoidance and tax evasion. Dear student, in this session we will cover some important topics of tax planning. First of all, we will look at the concept of the tax planning along with the examples. After that, we will cover the concept of tax avoiding along with the examples. After that, the next topic will be tax evasion along with the examples. Finally, we will look at the difference between tax planning, tax avoidance and tax evasion. So, in this particular session, we will cover the highlights of tax planning, avoidance and tax evasion. First of all, dear student, we will look at the concept of the tax planning. What is the meaning of the tax planning? Tax planning is a particular process of financial affair to be decided in such a way to minimize the tax liability. How we can minimize our tax liability? We can minimize our tax liability by taking the benefits of government exemptions, government deductions, rebates and various reliefs. So, main purpose of tax planning is to get the benefit of the government schemes, government deductions to minimize the tax liability. It's based on the Income Tax Act 1961. You can take the advantage of deductions to minimize or eliminate your tax liability. Remember, this process is legal because it is according to the provision of a particular tax act. For planning of income tax, we have to go through with the various provisions of deductions, exemptions under Income Tax Act 1961. So, it is 100% legal, moral and ethical process to minimize the tax liability of an individual. Dear student, we can look now various examples of tax planning, how we can get the benefit of government deduction. For the tax planning, we can take the advantage of various heads and their prescribed deduction. We can take the benefit of the deductions from GTI, that is from section 80C to 80U. Then we can get the advantage of some exempted incomes as per the Income Tax Act 1961. For example, if we are starting a life insurance policy, payment of the life insurance policy premium, the amount received from life insurance policy is 100% exempt. So, we can save our tax in this way. We can take the benefit of the various tax rates reliefs related in the payment of the tax for a particular assessment year. We can also take the advantage of tax holidays declared by the government on the installation of certain industries in certain areas. So, in all these ways, we can minimize our tax liability and plan our tax to pay the government and take the benefit of the provisions of various tax laws. Dear student, our next concept is tax avoidance. What is tax avoidance? It is another method of saving the tax, but it is not in a moral way. What is tax avoidance? It is a process to avoid the tax or dodging the tax by taking the advantage of loopholes or deficiency or limitation of a tax law. It is legal process, but it is not ethical process. If a particular person continuously involved in these activities, tax avoidance activities, it is a punishable crime. Many persons are involved in our country in tax avoidance process. It is a process, it is legal but not moral. Dear student, now we have some examples of tax avoidance. First of all, we can transfer our asset to our spouse or any particular relative for the purpose of saving the tax. We can transfer our funds also in the same manner. Some persons are involved in the acquisition of assets in the name of their relative or any other person to minimize the tax liability. We can start a new company in tax haven countries to minimize the tax or to save the tax. Some persons are also involved in the establishment of many business organizations to reduce the tax liability, because in this case the tax liability will be divided in several different entities, and in this way the tax liability on a person will also reduce. So here we have some examples of tax avoidance. Dear student, now we have the last option of tax saving, that is illegal, that is not moral, that is known as the tax evasion. Tax evasion means not filing the tax properly with use of falsification of the accounts, misrepresentation of the accounts. A particular person tries to minimize the tax liability with these particular activities. This is a particular act with intention of not payment of the tax at all. Definitely it is avoidance of the law, it is the evasion of the law, and it is 100% punishable crime once a particular involved in the tax evasion activities. In our country, the tax evasion rate is very high because of the very high rate of the government taxes or income tax slab rates. Dear student, now we are going to look some examples of tax evasion, how people used the process of the tax evasion to eliminate their tax liability, to hide their income. First of all, some persons are not filing the return or filing the false return of the income. False return of the income means showing less income to minimize the tax. Next, they also involved in the preparation and submission of inaccurate financial statements. Inaccurate financial statement means statements showing not a correct income, a false income, a minimum income to avoid the tax, to evade the tax. Some person are using the fake documents to claim the deductions or exemptions. Suppose you are not entitled for a particular exemption or deduction, but still you are submitting false document to claim the deduction and to minimize the tax liability. Some persons are also showing the expenditure, excess expenditure, to decrease the taxable income of their business, of their organization. Some persons are also storing, hiding their wealth, their property, their funds in outside country, out of the India. They are saving their incomes and their earnings to avoid the tax, to evade the tax in India. All these examples are definitely punishable crime as per Income Tax Act 1961. Dear student, finally we are looking at the difference between these three tax saving modes. All these are common in order to save the tax, but we have basic difference in all these three methods. Now we are going to start the discussion on the difference between tax planning, tax avoidance and tax evasion. Dear student, now we have the difference, point-wise difference between all these three tax saving modes. First of all, we will start with the purpose. Yes, what is the purpose of the tax evasion? Yes, definitely no payment of tax. A particular person involved in tax evasion intentionally not paying the tax at all. What is the tax avoidance? Purpose of tax avoidance? Minimizing the tax, but again by taking advantage of loopholes, deficiencies, drawbacks of a particular act. And what is the tax planning? The purpose of tax planning is to ensure about the tax efficiency of a person. Again, it is a particular moral, legal and allowed process. Next, legality, that we already discussed. Tax evasion is not legal at all. It is illegal activity, leads to punishable crime. Tax avoidance is legal, but it is against the spirit of law. And about tax planning, it is 100% legal and moral. Nature, yes, the process of tax evasion involved illegitimate means to reduce the tax, to minimize the tax, to avoid the tax. Again, the tax avoidance is based on the loopholes of a law, and the tax planning, it is the based on deductions, exemptions as per the law, as per the provisions of a law. Exercise. where we have to exercise these modes. First of all, tax evasion. We can do the tax evasion once we know the tax liability of a particular assessment year, then we can plan for tax evasion activities. Done before the tax liability. Yes, tax avoidance done before the tax liability arise means a particular income we have received or we earned, then we plan for the avoidance of that particular income in advance before filing the return. And the tax planning process start well before the filing of the return. Finally, what is the impact? Yes, tax evasion leads to the penalty or imprisonment because it is illegal against the law. Penalty or imprisonment is also in tax avoidance when a particular person continuously involved in these activities and tax authorities have a proof for this particular act of a taxpayer or assessee. There is no punishment or imprisonment for tax planning because it is 100% legal process. So, no punishment or imprisonment for tax planning process. Dear student, today we cover some important topics related with the tax planning. We covered tax avoidance, the concept and the example, tax evasion, the concept and the example, and finally we covered difference between all these three methods. I hope now all the students have the clear concept idea of this particular topic of tax planning. Thank you.